What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Now, an extremely popular topic in sports cards is to talk about the value of sports cards since February or March of 2021, or whatever you want to call the peak, when sports cards were on absolute fire. So I figured I'd go back and look at the values of some vintage sports cards and separate it by decade and see how the different decades have performed over the last about 2.5 years. Now, this data is extremely dubious at best. I only picked 5 cards from each decade, so obviously this isn't going to give you all of the data that you need, but I just picked randomly 5 cards from each decade. They're all stars. So I got 5 1960s, 5 1950s, 5 1940s, and 5 1930s cards. Now, these were the first 5 I looked up for each decade, so I didn't hand pick these trying to get it the way that I wanted. I just randomly wrote down 5 cards from each decade that were popular cards. So let's check out how they've done. One more thing to note before we fully get started: all the grades for these, I'm taking the decade and then going one lower than that. So 60s, I'm looking at all PSA 5s, 50s, all PSA 4s, 40s, all PSA 3s, and 30s, all PSA 2. Now, this video was pre-recorded. I've been a little busy moving into my new apartment. I'll touch on that in future videos, but all the points still stand. The values may be a little different than I said, but the points still stand. So we'll start off with the 1960s, and for the first card of the 1960s, we'll start with maybe the most popular card of the 60s, the Nolan Ryan rookie. So I'm going to put up some VCP averages and sales, stuff like that, so you guys can kind of track what I'm looking at with me. All right, so like I said, Nolan Ryan, PSA 5, some of the recent sales. It's got the VCP average at $1,037. You can look at the sales and see it's about that. The most recent one I'm seeing is at $1,000. There's some a little lower, some a little higher. So I'm just gonna call it 1,000 even is about what it's worth now. If you have a Nolan Ryan and a 5, probably worth about $1,000. Now, if we scroll back here to early 2021, you can see some sales kind of all over the place with this one. Sales were anywhere from like 1,400 up to like 2,000. So I'll call it about $1,500. $1,500 is probably what the Ryan rookie in a 5 was worth back then. Again, March, February of 2021. So kind of keep all this data in mind, and then at the end, we'll kind of go back, review it all, and kind of see what all these different values and how they've changed mean. Now, next card, we're looking at the Pete Rose rookie 63 tops. If you look at the recent sales here, I would put it around $1,750. There's a couple sales in the past few months this year that were lower, but if you look at them, they're old label, they're off center, they're just not as nice as some of the more recent 5s they've sold. So we're gonna kind of toss those out. I'm calling the value of the Rose and 5 around $1,750. And when we scroll back on Pete Rose back to February, March of 2021, there's some sales all the way from like $1,500 up to $3,000. I'm gonna go ahead and call it $2,250 is about the range of where they're at. There's some higher, some lower. I'm gonna call it $2,250. It was about the average price back then. 1965 Topps mantle, one of the most popular mantles. That one, you look at some of the recent sales here, I'd put it about $650 for 5. That's roughly what it's worth. When we scroll back, we're gonna actually find that it's about exactly where it was during the peak. Sales are in that same kind of range, that $650 to $700 range. So that one is basically exactly flat with where it was before. I didn't want to have all these be like super key cards or rookies, so I tried to pick some that weren't crazy popular or like the biggest, most expensive card in the set. So for the 60s, we got the 61 Yastrzemski, still a very popular card. This one I'd put around now for a 5, about $100. You see there's sales in the $90 range. 125, 100. So I'd put it about $100 now. And when we scroll back on that Yaz and 5, you can see values just like the mantle are basically the exact same. I'd put it maybe 100 to 110. We'll call it $110. That's about what they were selling for in February and March. And then the 66 Topps Maze in a 5. Right now it's looking about, the VCP average is $215. I'd put it about a $220 card. You see, you got an auction that's lower, but in general, probably averages out to around $220. Looking back at the peak, you can find the average would be somewhere around $250. Okay, so quick recap for the 1960s. We got the Nolan Ryan rookie down about 33%, Rose rookie down about 22%, Mays down about 12%, Yaz down about 9%, and the Mickey Mantle staying strong at basically the same value it was. So overall, an average for the 60s was down about 15.2%. Keep that in mind as we go forward. And like I said, this data is very dubious at best. It's just 5 cards. It doesn't actually mean anything. I'm not going to sit here all day and pull up every card from every decade. So I just am getting a little sample of everything. All right, so we're on to the 1950s, and we're starting off with another big card, the 1953 Topps Mickey Mantle. This card, you guys can see the sales. I'd put it around $47.50 at the moment. Like always, there's going to be some sales a little higher, some sales a little lower. There's one sale that's kind of an outlier at $5,600, but in general, it's pretty close to the VCP average. I'd say $47.50 is a kind of a fair value for a Mantle and a 4. And when we roll back the clock, you can see the Mantle and 4, February and March was around $5,000 to $5,500. I'd say more like the $5,500 range. When we look at the 53 Mantle, it's about 13.5% less than it was in February, March. Moving to the 55 Topps Jackie Robinson, our second card from the 1950s. As you can see now, this card is around a $600 card. Obviously, some higher, some lower. And then as we scroll back to 2021, once we got into March, this card was trending around $1,000 for PSA 4. Now I'd put it at about 600, maybe 650 bucks. So we'll call it about 650. That's a little closer to the VCP average. And that would be a 35% decrease from its height. Bob Gibson PSA 4, right now I'd put it around 600. 2021, this card was a little closer to 700. 56 Clemente in 4 is right now, I'd put it around a $500 card. And scrolling back, it looks like that one has been in the same range, maybe a $475 card. So that one's actually been up a little bit over the past 2 years. 58 Mays, about 200 bucks now. And when we scroll back to 2021, it's about 275. So when we look overall at the 1950s, now the 50s are very similar to the 60s. We got the 53 Mantle down 13%, 55 Jackie down 35%, Gibson down 14%, Mays down 27%, and the Clemente up 5%. Overall, down about 17%, so very, very similar to the 60s. We'll see how the rest of this plays out. Now, an amazing card, 41 play ball, Joe DiMaggio, one of the best cards from the 1940s. Card is right now around $2,750. And at the height of everything, it was around a $3,500 card. So not a huge change, but it's pulled back a little bit. 48 Leaf Ted Williams in a 3. This is around a $1,500 card, and when we go back to 2021, it was around a $1,250 card. So that one has actually seen a decent bump in price. 48 Bowman Yogi Berra in a 3, around a $700 card. When we look back, it was about a $750 card. So that one at least has stayed pretty consistent over the past years. 49 Bowman Stan Musial for a 3 is right around $450 right now. And when you go back, it's going to say around $400. So the Musial has seen a little bit of a bump in price. And our last card for the 1940s is going to be a 41 play ball Greenberg. And I couldn't find, there wasn't enough sales data for PSA 3s for this one, so I went to PSA 4s. PSA 4s of this will run you around 425 bucks. And in 2021, a PSA 4 would have ran you around 480, 485. Somewhere in that range. So for the 1940s, we had 2 cards that were down and 3 cards that had seen a little bit of a bump in price. So overall, if you take all the percentages up and down, divide them by 5, which is how many cards we looked at, it's going to be up 0.4%. So you had the 60s down about 18, 19%. You had the 50s down about 15, 16%. And when we get into the 40s, it's basically even or up 0.4% from the cards we've looked at. I'm only going to do one more decade, but let's check out the 1930s and see if this trend continues. Starting off the 30s with a 33 Goudey Tris Speaker. As you can see right now, it's around $420 based on the last few sales. Maybe you could call it $400. And then when we go back to 2021, it's looking like it was around $360 for a PSA 2. So that one's seen a little bit of an increase over the past couple years. Now, one of my favorite looking cards of all time, the 34 Goudey Lou Gehrig. This is the kind of close-up portrait of him. Right now, this card is around $3,500, $3,500 to $4,000 range. Now, there was only one sale of this in a 2 in like February, March, but it was on March 1st, and it was $3,150. You take that, $3,150, and now it's at about $3,500. That one's actually seen a little bit of a rise also. 1935 Goudey Babe Ruth. There's not a whole lot of sales data for this one, so I'm using a PSA 3, but you can see around 2021, it was about a $2,000 card. Now if we're looking to current day, it's around a $2,500, $2,700 card if you're looking to get a PSA 3 of that nice Babe Ruth card. Now, some of these we're just gonna have to use different grades because there's not a ton of sales on some of these, but the 39 Play Ball Mel Ott, I didn't want to pull all just massive cards, so I'm taking some kind of more in the middle tier, like this 39 Play Ball Ott. This one, we're gonna have to look at a PSA 3, but those in 2021, there was a couple sales around $150 to $175. We'll call it $150. And then in a 3, there's only been 2 sales this year that I can find on VCP. If you average those out, there's a pretty drastic difference in the amount they sold for. So if you just average the 2 out, it looks like the one guy got a good deal. If you average the 2 out, it's about $167. So from $150 to now about $167 on the Mel Ott. We look at the 38 Goudey Hank Greenberg, our last card for today. January of 2021 in a PSA 3. Again, there wasn't many sales for 2s, but for PSA 3, did $675 at a buy it now. And in the later part of 2022, there hasn't been any sales this year of the ones with the drawings in the background, but the most recent sale of PSA 3 was $1,250. So that one has seen a big jump. Although it was only 2 sales, the first one was a buy it now and the second one was an auction that went for almost double as high. So what does this all mean? We got the 1930s up on average about 29.5% since the peak of January and March 2021. Not only is the 30s up about 30%, if we look at some of the stuff I was mentioning earlier, we had the 60s down about 18-19%, the 50s down about 15-16%, the 40s basically even, and the 30s up about 30%. So you can see each decade as you go back, the cards have held up a little bit better. It would be interesting to look further into the pre-war and see if that's kind of the same case. But not only was that the case, like I said, I just picked 5 cards from each decade. And if we look at the cards specifically, if you look at the 1960s, we had 4 cards that decreased in value and 1 card that was about the exact same price as it was 2 years ago. In the 1950s, we had still 4 cards that were lower than where they were and 1 card that was actually higher than where it was. We go to the 1940s, we had only 2 cards that were lower in value, and we had 3 cards that were up in value since 2021. And when we go to the 1930s, all 5 cards that I selected have actually gone up in price over the last 2 years. That's pretty crazy. Like I said, I did not handpick these at all. I would just thought of 5 cards from each decade, fired them off, tried to pick some that were really big cards and some that were just stars in, kind of average sets. Obviously, this isn't a lot of data. Like I said, it's only 5 cards, but it was definitely interesting to look at. I wasn't really sure if there was going to be any correlation. I don't know if this is enough to tell everyone go buy pre-war cards and spend all your money on pre-war cards, but it does kind of line up with what I had mentioned in my previous video talking about which sets you should be buying and about kind of the vintage low-grade bubble. In that video, I kind of said you want to focus on rarer, older cards like 41 Play Ball. 33 Goudey isn't extremely rare, but it's definitely older, more stable. 38 Goudey was a set I definitely hammered home in that video, and I'm still a strong believer in that 38 Goudey set. In my opinion, probably one of the best places you could put money if you're trying to put money in sports cards. I think everything we looked at in this video kind of supports the stuff I was saying in the previous video. You want to be looking for those rarer cards, high numbers in pre-war is really where it's at. But obviously this is all just for fun. Buy whatever you'd like. I just know this is a popular topic and I figured some people would enjoy looking at it just like I did. So let me know what you guys think. You guys think if we added more cards to this, you'd still see kind of the same type of trend? Do you think if we went back further, you'd also see, cards from 1910s and 1920s holding their value like you did with the 1930s? Or do you think if we added more cards, it would kind of all balance out and everything would be about up or down the same percentage? Had a lot of fun making this video, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys all later. All right, guys, a quick giveaway before you head out. Got this 81 Donruss Rickey Henderson I said I'd be giving away. That is what we're drawing for today. If you guys leave a comment on this video, you'll have a chance in the next video I will be drawing for this Al Kaline. I gave this away before, but it never got claimed. So he'll be the next video's giveaway. All you have to do is comment and be subscribed. This is for Rickey Henderson, but let's go ahead and pick a winner. See who it's gonna be. Looks like JD66 cards. Awesome pickups. Definitely have to go to the National at some point. Appreciate the comment, my man. I think you've won before, so congratulations. I'll message you on Instagram because I know that's where you are, and I'll get him headed your way. All right, everyone, take care.